Hey everybody, Phil here from BAMM.TV. When I was younger, I sincerely believed anything was possible. I believed I would be a baseball player, or I would write the next great American novel, or I could be president if I wanted. And while I refuse to fully turn my back on this notion, I have to acknowledge that limitations to these ideas are clear and in the foreground. Some of this has to do with just knowing more, growing up, but some of it's just cynicism. Well, today we have a story that pushes the limitations back out of focus and reminds us that incredible things might happen if you're open to them. Now, incredible is not guaranteed or even probable, but it is possible. And I don't know about you, but every now and again, I need to hear stories about when might happen becomes happened. With more, here's Joy Bien-Kahn.
The wedding was gorgeous. My cousin and his beautiful wife were getting married at a picturesque event center in a ritzy suburb of Boston. The drinks kept coming, the food was delicious, everyone was dancing. And then, just as the night was waning, the lead singer of the wedding band started to whistle, and the middle-aged guitarist and pianist stumbled their way through Home by Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. That could have been the end of my relationship with the song. The starts and stops, the forgotten lyrics, the painful attempts to dance and sing along could have ruined it forever. Instead, it was the final push I needed to write down the story I'd heard a couple weeks before at a summer camp on the western edge of Yosemite National Park. The story is one of those tall tales that's gone extinct with the Google search. One of those too big for this world myths you always hear about a friend of a friend. But it was the protagonist, Nathaniel Markman, a soft-spoken fiddler from Missouri, whose eyes lock on yours during conversation and close when his bow slides across violin strings, who sat to my left and told it all to me. And unlikely as it is, this story has the advantage of being true. It was February of 2010 when one of his friends saw that Edward Sharpe, a band they all were obsessed with, was playing in San Francisco on Markman's birthday. They felt they had to be there. So his friends piled into a car and went to the show, which was sold out except the 200 tickets the venue was keeping at the door. It was at that moment that fate intervened, if you believe in such things. Here's Markman's take on the night.
So we get there, and there's a long line of people trying to get tickets. We're there, we're trying to get in, and we decide we'll play some music on the street while we're waiting to get a ticket, and so we're out there.
Luck was on their side that night. The line crept slowly forward, and they were within the first 200 people. The group returned to the car to put their instruments away, excited that they get to see the show. But as they loaded up the trunk, one of Markman's friends had an idea that would prove crucial.
And my friend Danny said, if you don't bring your violin, there's no chance you would ever play with Edward Sharpe, so maybe you should bring your violin. Most
people would scoff at such a statement, but Markman is a man who lives by that kind of logic. He grabbed his violin, and the group moved towards the door. At the turnstile, the security guard told Markman that he couldn't bring an instrument to the show. His friends wouldn't have it. Markman walked by the security guard, showing him his empty hands. His friend snuck the violin in behind him. The group slid their way up to the 10th row, and Markman began to tune his fiddle as the warm-up band played. When Edward Sharpe came on, it felt like a dream. Here he was, in California, surrounded by his friends, watching the band he loved. Near the end of the set, Alexander Ebert, the band's lead singer, began to whistle the first few bars of Home.
At that point, I get on a friend's shoulders and I start airbowing the violin in the audience, to the song Home. This is the Home song, And as I'm playing it, the lead singer, Alex, he looks out in the audience, he sees this guy airbowing the violin, and he sticks his finger out at me and he says, all right, bring that guy up here, At that point I was like, is this real? Because this is something that I had foreseen. It's not that I had foreseen it, but I had kind of thought, if there's ever been, I would want to play with, this is it. And then there I am getting pulled up on the stage with my violin. And whenever I'm nervous, I just, for some reason, it makes me play a little faster, play a little stronger. And so I remember just really taking that solo as much as I could, just going crazy with the bow. And the audience was, flaring up. And it was definitely the most attention I've ever had on me in playing the violin.
When he left the stage amid glad-handed and cheers, he thought his unbelievable night was over. He had a story he could tell for the rest of his life, and that was okay with him. Markman is not an unreasonable man.
Glad now to say that wasn't the end of the story.
Markman comes from a family of violinists. His great-grandmother bought his grandpa the violin that he plays today. As we talked, he told me one of his earliest memories. He was 4, perched upon the bed as his parents read through some music lesson advertisements in the newspaper.
They asked me if I wanted to play the violin, and I just jumped up on the bed and I was like, yes, of course. They could have said, tuba, and I was like, yes, of course. I think at that age I was just excited to, play something.
But as luck would have it, it was violin, and Markman took to it instantly. He went to hundreds upon hundreds of lessons throughout his childhood, learning through the Suzuki method and loving every minute of it. But as a teenager, he put the violin away. The instrument just didn't seem cool. Luckily, in college, he was drawn back to it. Markman was living in a co-op in St. Louis, finishing up his last semester at Washington University when he first heard Edward Sharpe.
And I was like, who are these guys? This music is like, it's great music, but also they take, this music scene so casually, and so like what they want more is to connect with the audience.
His job in the house was music coordinator. He was tasked with finding touring bands to play a set at the house and then hosting the open mic that followed. He and some friends put together a band one night and played covers of Home and 40-Day Dream.
I remember thinking at the time, if I were to play with one band, like I'd love to play with a band like this with Edward Sharpe. And I just kind of said it. It was a thought. I may have told some friends out loud.
Markman finished up finals and graduated. He'd lived in the Midwest his whole life. He wanted something new. So he packed up his minivan with instruments and drove out to California. One by one, his friends began moving to the Bay Area. A group of them started a band together called Swan Man Travels. Their lives were the lives of many aspiring musicians, recording when they could, busking on the street for tips, and going to concerts when they could afford it. After the show, his group of friends saw Edward Sharpe packing up their instruments, getting ready to go down to Santa Cruz. Danny Jolis, the one who convinced Markman to sneak in the violin, had another idea. Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros had been nice enough to play for them, so they should go play a concert for the band.
So the band was out loading the equipment into their truck, and we came up and they showed us some attention. And I remember Christian, that's the lead guitar player, wanted us to do like an original, so we played an original. And I think it was really casually, if I remember, Alex, the lead singer, said, you guys should come and open for us. We were playing a couple shows, we're going to be going down the coast of California. And that's just, I think, very much in line with his personality. And so, I think we may have played it cool, but we're like, okay, yeah, sure. And then we're like walking away, and I'm instantly like calling up as many friends as I can who, I've played music with this year. And I was like, come on, guys, we got to get together. We're going to go like on this little mini tour down the coast of California with Edward Sharpe. We're going to open for them.
Markman's group opened for the opener in Santa Cruz, San Luis Obispo, and Santa Barbara, touring with the band they waited in line to see just days earlier. And the shows were all sold out, so the venues were already 3/4 full when they would start to play.
We didn't go on stage. We would go into the audience of these sold-out shows, and we'd form like this little circle, and it'd be like a little dance party, and we'd play a bunch of bluegrass tunes, and the band would like stick their heads out behind the stage and be like, what are these guys doing? Like, they're just out in the audience like playing, like starting a dance party before the Edward Sharpe show, which I think is totally appropriate. And then for that mini tour, I would get pulled up for a song or two, and then it ended up being, come just stay on stage with us with your violin.
After the Santa Barbara show, Edward Sharpe was set to tour through Australia. Markman and his buddies weren't about to follow them halfway across the world on a whim, but they parted ways with a promise.
We'll give you a call, when we're back. And I wasn't sure if that was actually going to happen or not. And so that was kind of part of me letting go. I can't have too much wrapped up in this. And then they did end up reaching out to me.
Were you blown away that they did?
I was really excited, yeah.
Markman met the band in the Midwest for a summer tour, playing a bunch of cities and then the Bonnaroo Festival. He also played festivals back in California at Strawberry and at Outside Lands. But it was during the show in the quad of his alma mater, Wash U, that the magnificent serendipity of the entire episode finally hit him.
At this moment, I think it was during Desert Song, because for some reason that song, it has this part where the drum comes in and goes, tack, 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 and it's very, it has a very surreal sound to it, and that's what I was feeling at this moment when I was looking out at the audience and out beyond the stage are my parents, my best friends, all these students, and then the walls of my university just lit up at nighttime, and I'm up there just wailing on the violin and thinking, oh, this whole story actually happened. Like, here I am back home, back at my school. I've returned, but a little change from this whole experience.
So many little things had to happen for you to get on that tour. So many little coincidences, so many make or break moments. Do you think you were fated to play with Edward Sharpe, or did you actively make it happen?
It feels a little bit like fate. I mean, I don't know. I think at that point in my life, I was out of college and I kind of wanted to travel a bit. And so the mentality that I had during that year after college was kind of just holding my hands out and seeing what would happen.
Now, if this story were a movie, it would end at that wash sheet performance. We'd see Markman on a spotlighted stage, fiddle raised and eyes closed, before a mass of screaming fans, doting parents, and astonished friends. The song would end, the curtain would fall, and the screen would turn to black. But this is a true story, and Markman was just 23 when it happened. So after the summer, he moved back to Oakland and started once again to live the life of an aspiring musician, with one difference.
On some level, the relationship with me and the band was that I would just get these emails that, or a phone call from Alex saying, what are you doing right now? We're recording an album. Can you be here tomorrow? And that kind of thing was like so exciting and also so distracting from my life. Because that was like definitely like my priority. If I ever got a call from Alex, come record, like, okay. And at some point, when those things don't come so frequently and like I have to start creating my own music and my own scene, like it doesn't make sense. It's like I'm not going to reach out too much. Like a little piece of me has to stay, with the idea that, well, if it happens, like it's great, gratitude, and a piece of me is like, and I also have to like build what I have right now, which is, I live in Oakland, I have a scene, I have a job, and I have a community up here.
When I first met Markman and heard his story, I was struck with the wild narrative, but mostly I was struck with him. I'm an overeducated writer without religion. I wasn't wooed by the divine influence on the tale. Instead, I was wooed by the gumption to go to the sold-out show without a ticket, the nerve to sneak the violin in, the poise to play well in that moment, and the bravery to drop everything and go on that tour. But most of all, I was impressed with the strength to not hold on to the opportunity for dear life. At the time when I interviewed him first, he told me, and I quote, "If I really put my heart into one thing, and it's just music, I'm pretty sure the universe will provide. It'll come together." I asked him if he still felt that way 3 years later.
I mean, I do think there's things that we can control, and the thing that we can control is being the best musician that we can be. And certain things, I think, in the music industry that are not necessarily controllable. And so I think it's a mix of the two. And I think the best I can do is just do the music that I like to create. So.
And that's the tough thing. Markman had a chance to peek behind the curtain, to see what it looked like to make it. He toured the country playing sold-out shows. He was on stage in front of thousands at Bonnaroo and outside lands. He rode his friend's shoulders to the top of the music mountain, but then he came right back down again. When we sat beside that pool in Yosemite, he just finished touring with one of the biggest bands in the world. He just spent a year starring in a tall tale. The world was his for the taking. Obviously, life looks very different at 23 than it does at 26. But if you think this is a sad story, you're missing the point. The same innate thing that allowed Markman to get on stage, that also let him continually thrive and make or break moments along the way, will continue to exist throughout his life. And most importantly of all, the man can really play. After finishing the interview, Markman grabbed his violin and began to tune it. We asked him to play the Suzuki scales, to play a bit from Desert Song. Finally, we asked him to play Home. Don't worry, this isn't some born-again testimony. Miracles, divine force, I still can't quite negotiate their presence. But I can testify to one thing. Extraordinary events don't just randomly happen to a person. Extraordinary people make events extraordinary. And Markman was exactly the right man at exactly the right moment. Fate had nothing to do with it.
For all things Musical Yearbook, check out themusicalyearbook.com. If you really like this podcast, subscribe to it right now. Do it. It'd be fantastic. And you'll get all the new episodes right away. Musical Yearbook is produced by BAMM.TV. Check out BAMM.TV for hundreds of videos by incredible indie artists. We have episodic content on there. We have documentary shorts. And as always, just head over to Facebook and type in BAMM.TV and follow. Have a good one.